it was a huge bummer to see Aaron Rodgers, who's have a of a time. Stupid. What a bummer it was that he lost. That's such a shame.
Do you want to hear his stupid stats over the fourth quarter of his last three season-ending home games?
Does it involve some sort of back-breaking interception because he panics?
No, this was the first time that happened. This is gonna live rent free in your head for the rest of your life, sir. Aaron Rodgers' fourth quarter stats: 2020 NFC Championship game versus Tampa Bay, 4 for 11, 54 yards, 52.8 passer rating. 2021 divisional round against the San Francisco 49ers, 4 for 7, 17 yards, 62.2 passer rating. Week 18 versus the Detroit Lions, 2 for 6, 12 yards, 1 interception, 2.8 passer rating.
But at least he's making $43 million a year.
All 3 games at home in the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field.
Obviously, you did not cheer loud enough.
No, it was all on us. We didn't do our part.
It's not his fault.
We didn't carry the G.
Yeah, there's a lot to dissect this week. Obviously, the Packers were in a de facto playoff game and lost to the Lions. I knew as soon as it went to 20-16 with 5.5 minutes to go or whatever. I'm like, here we go. Hero Bowl Part 17 is coming up soon. It's going to be, I have to carry this team and we're just not going to run the ball anymore. And then they described it in the postgame as a blown blocking assignment, but the Lions also blitzed like 6 or 7 people. So it's like really hard to block that anyways. Yeah. And then giving Watson a chance into double coverage with, I think his name's Kirby Joseph, who had 1 interception called back earlier in the game and then picked off Rodgers twice earlier in the season. So he's got 3 interceptions against Rodgers this year, which is hilarious. Yeah, I fail to see how we can start to – maybe there was a missed block, but also just a bad decision.
Yeah, that was the other thing. In those games, 2020, threw at Devontae's feet. 2021, hero ball into double, triple coverage to Devontae. This year,
Lazard was open.
Yep, hero ball to Watson.
So, pretty. I mean, you guys basically you didn't make the playoffs, but that was basically in line with all the other playoff losses you've had in recent memory. Right there was kind of the same thing. And like I told you this morning, you don't have to go to San Francisco now. I think we could rid ourselves of the possibilities that team that we saw last night had any chance to compete with San Francisco.
Yeah, this team fooled us for. I shouldn't even really say fooled us because they should have beat the Bears and they should have beaten the Rams. This team gave Packer fans false hope, and the national media latched onto it because it was a good storyline and a good winning in. But last night was really a microcosm of the entire season. Like, the Minnesota game was clearly an anomaly. And even in that game, the offense didn't play phenomenal. They had a kickoff return for a touchdown and a pick six for a touchdown and a couple other turnovers that put them in good field position. So the 2022 Green Bay Packers are exactly what we saw last night. They just, again, they gave us some false hope, but they just weren't a very good team. And I am very much at peace with the fact that they're not in the playoffs. Out of all of the season-ending games I've gone through in the last decade, this doesn't even like crack the top 5, top 6, top 7.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you guys were 13-4 and got bounced in the first round or something. So
it did get me thinking, though. Now that we're in the second year of the 7th seed in the playoff seeding, I'm really curious to see how the 7th seeds fare this year, because I just feel like at least this year in both conferences, there's just a very significant drop off between the 6th and 7th seed as far as potential in the playoffs.
Yeah, is there any teams without, I think maybe the Buccaneers, but is there any teams in the playoffs with less hope than the Seahawks and the Dolphins right now?
No, not at all.
So, yeah, I say I thought the Packers had it. There's a couple things I want to discuss about the Packers. First of all, God bless Mason Crosby. If he's within 45 yards at Lambeau, it's a tough place to kick. If he's within 45 yards at Lambeau, it's pretty much been going in lately. But I think in the modern day of football, when you have kickers making 60, 65-yard field goals and your kicker can't get a 53-yarder to the at least to the goalposts, I think that's something that should be discussed further.
Yeah, I think we may have seen Mason lace him up for the last time last night. Those balls were just dying halfway
Yeah,
to the
and
uprights.
like I said, if you need an automatic kicker from 40, you're good. If you
Yeah,
if you
his
need a
accuracy
Justin
isn't
Tucker
suffering.
type game-winning kick in Detroit, no chance.
Yeah, his accuracy surely has not suffered this year. It's just like you said, the leg power,
Yeah.
especially when you're kicking a rock hard ball.
Now, why is it that not this more of it's a loaded question. I don't expect a direct answer from you. Why is it that anytime there's a big game, Aaron Jones has a back-breaking fumble?
That was another thing on my list. We've seen that time and time again. Apparently, the two Aarons in big games just have colluded. NFL rigged.
Yeah, just another. He had 5 fumbles this year that were lost, and many of them, as pointed out by people on Twitter, were in big moments of games. So,
The other thing that's disappointing is oftentimes it's like when he breaks a big run too. It's
yeah,
not like he gets stood up in the hole and they strip it. It's like I don't know if it's just reaching for extra yards. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure.
yeah. So, curious to see about that one. I didn't think Rodgers had a good first like 2.5 quarters. Like he was doing everything he's supposed to do. He had the one interception that was called back. There was a couple plays that were called back that could have definitely influenced the game too. But he had the one interception called back. But other than that, I thought he was looking fine up until the fourth quarter. So I don't think he was like out there winning them the game, but he definitely wasn't losing them the game either.
No, he had a couple of good throws that ended up being incomplete as well. The who was it that dropped? They hit the turf. Was that Lazard? Um, they ended up ruling it incomplete. He had the really good pass to Tunyon, and then he had a really nice throw to Dobbs up the sideline. That, although it was incomplete, it was in a spot where only Dobbs could have gotten it.
Yeah, if you had asked me in week 4 the trajectory of your rookie receivers, I would have thought Dobbs would have been like number 1 at the end of the season and Watson would have been an afterthought. So it's weird how they kind of swapped when Watson started to rise to prominence there. Now Dobbs has kind of been an afterthought after having such a promising outlook at the start of the year.
Yeah, his injury midseason didn't help.
So there's that. I got to ask you about the Rasul Douglas. So you were at the game. So you probably had, and there's probably a lot of weird reactions going around. So Rasul Douglas walked down the line on a Lions field goal attempt to end the first half, and it was about 48 yards or so. And Badgley had already missed one from about that range earlier. And LaFleur calls a timeout, ice kicker. Douglas walks down the line to take the ball away from the long snapper, which is something I've never seen before. And then one of the offensive linemen takes exception to it, and Douglas, in his words, after the game, says, "I pushed him." Anybody with 2 eyes and that watched that saw that he slapped the guy in the face. And so then he got a 15-yard penalty, personal foul, moves the ball up 15 yards, and now it's a chip shot field goal, so an easy make. What was your guys' reaction to that?
I thought he dropped something at first. I thought he was going to pick something up. I've never in my life seen someone do something. It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre. And I know they were trying to get him from kicking the field goal when they iced him, so he didn't get a practice attempt or something. It just I don't know, weird, very
I
weird.
I always thought it was frowned upon / like you could be penalized if the ref blows the whistle in a timely manner and you still snap it and try a practice kick. I thought that was like now against the rules or something.
Is it? I don't know.
Or at least you would get a telling off by the ref and maybe a flag the second time you did it, but
Also, when you get to the NFL, is icing the kicker really that effective? I mean, I've heard kickers talk about sometimes they like the fact that they get a little extra time to take in the wind direction, how they're going to plant, those sorts of things. Like, I don't know. I just feel like icing the kicker in the NFL is a little bit of an overrated tactic anyways. So if you don't want the guy to get a practice kick, don't even try to ice him. Just send him out there and let him hammer it home.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because I'm imagining it's a lot more effective in college when you don't have, you know, elite kickers out there or whatever. But
Yeah, for sure.
so yeah, there's only one other thing I want to touch on for the game before we kind of get big picture. So Quay Walker, of all weeks to shove a trainer, the week where training staffs everywhere have been heralded for what they do on a day-to-day basis to keep the players safe and to respond in situations where there is a crisis. Of all weeks to shove a trainer, Quay Walker picks the play-in game at Lambeau to shove the trainer who is tending to DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I don't know. That was second time this year he got ejected for pushing someone who was just an innocent bystander also. So let's not forget that.
Yep.
And then Devontae Wyatt came in and gave him a shoulder too. Like
Yeah,
that
I'm
was equally as bad. I don't want to say equally as bad, but that was almost pretty close to just as bad.
Yeah, and then Quay was in the tunnel walking to the room, and there's camera on him, and he looked like a boy who just got his favorite toy taken away from him. And I mean, so we could talk about Hyatt, first round pick. He did not really contribute a whole lot to the team this year, if I'm being completely honest.
He didn't play much. He got his snap count was incredibly low. I think last night was the most he's played all season.
So something to be said there. Quay is a physical monster on defense who really sets the tone, especially in the run game. I wouldn't say he did anything that made me think, wow, this guy is special. And now you compound it with the two ejections he's had this year, and it's like, well, is he going to settle down? I mean, the poor guy. I don't feel bad for him because he did it to himself, but I feel bad that it was the last game of the year. Now he has to kind of let that fester for a whole offseason until he gets to training camp. So the timing couldn't have been worse. So I feel like a little bad for him just in that regards, but also like you did it to yourself. So
As I say, he made his bed, so now he gets to lay in it.
yeah. So I don't know. I would sit him down and say, one more time, and sorry, we're gonna have to cut you. Like this isn't just gonna work out. We can't have this kind of undisciplined nonsense in our team.
That's not just like, hey, you missed a tackle here. This is like the type of boneheaded stuff that will extend drives and change outcomes of games. You're not just talking, hey, this is something that's correctable in practice. Like this is very avoidable. I guess is what I'm getting at. Like it's very avoidable and unnecessary.
Yeah, and LaFleur says it reflects on him and the organization when people do stuff like that.
It
I've
does.
almost never seen a player shove a trainer or a not like a coach. We've seen players like touch refs before, but I've never seen them shove team members of the other team. Not only to do it once, but twice in a season. And then I never seen what Rasul Douglas did last night either. And I'm just like, all right, do these guys not like get the message from LaFleur then, or what's going on here?
So I don't know if it's some mental warfare that Dan Campbell's playing or that the Lions are playing, but if you go back to the whatever it was Week 9 game against the Lions in Detroit, Green Bay was really undisciplined in that game too. That was when Jair got the penalty for shoving someone after the play. There was a couple other things that game. As much as people talk about LaFleur shriveling up in big moments as a head coach and play caller, his teams have looked pretty undisciplined this year too. And I don't know if that's a byproduct of not winning, or again if it's just some mental warfare that Dan Campbell implemented.
Yeah. Shout out to Dan Campbell though. There was some incredible decisions that were made. I mean, obviously, he had the team ready, which is insane because they knew coming into the game that they were out based on the result in Seattle. And they looked ready. They looked ready to play. They looked motivated. Goff came out to a pretty poor start, but recovered eventually. And some of those play calls, I mean, they were going for it basically on most fourth downs and going for it on fourth down there at the end instead of taking an attempt at a field goal and then giving the ball back to Rodgers. They'd rather just get the first down and call it a game. But the screen pass to Amon-Ra where he pitched it to DeAndre Swift was without a doubt one of the coolest plays I've ever seen called, especially in that kind of moment.
Yeah, that was a pretty ballsy play. Very ballsy.
Yeah. So, what was the overall mood like at Lambeau as the game, as they got the fourth down conversion and people were starting to file out?
Well, I'll just say this: at the beginning of the game, it was electric. Like that place was rocking. People were amped. We, this is another case where I didn't actually intend on going to the game, but some buddies of mine were going, and they found standing room only tickets for cheap. So I was like, okay, I'll tag along. Much to the, um, my brain's fried today because I didn't get into bed until 2 a.m. Um, but from our vantage point, the place was rocking. And then as the game went on, it just kind of slowly got more and more subdued. And I think by the time people were leaving, I was just kind of listening into conversations to see what people were talking about. And obviously, most of the conversation was around what 12 is going to do. And some people are ready to run him out of town. Some people are saying, well, let's give him one more year. I don't know. I don't want to say depressed. I think it was just kind of like bummed, but also the realization of like, yeah, this team really wasn't that good.
Yeah, it was we should have seen it coming, but we also just had. I mean, they were on such a good run the last couple games, and like Tua laid an egg, Vikings laid an egg. So of that win streak, I don't know how much we can point back to be like, wow, they're just a good team. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, like them staying out of the playoffs is good for the playoffs. I think because we get smoked. I think Seattle's still going to get smoked too, but they at least face the 49ers twice a year and kind of know what to expect. And then like even the Steelers not making the playoffs, I think was good because I think Tua coming back to the Dolphins at least gives him a shot if he's healthy this week. But just nobody wants to watch the Steelers offense play against Buffalo. That just sounds awful. So I think the crop that we got for the playoffs is best case scenario in my opinion. And other than the Packers, I think everything kind of happened the way we thought it would happen. I don't think a lot of people thought New England was going to win in Buffalo this week. I don't think a lot of people had any questions about the Jaguars, although they made it look a little closer than it needed to be. Things like that. Bengals beat the Ravens to win the division, which a lot of people expected. So, yeah. So you're the one who pointed out to me the Packers salary cap issues. I did not even do it. Wasn't me.
I know I did that just for you because the season's over, so we can talk about those things now.
Oh, all right. Well, they're they're gonna have some work to do in the offseason.
They got a lot of work to
And
do.
if Rodgers does retire, which are you ready for part 3 of this off-season drama fest of is he not again for the
That
third year in a row?
the good news is I don't think it's really going to hold the team hostage because I don't really know. I shouldn't say it doesn't change much. Obviously, it changes a lot if it's him or Jordan Love, but I don't think it changes the drafting mindset per se. But what it does change is how you restructure slash don't resign guys slash walk away from some contracts. So that's the one area that I guess I hope he does kind of speed that up. But I would say we'll know probably by March 1 is my guess.
Yeah. So, well, it also depends if any other big time quarterbacks retire because he can't share the stage with them at the Hall of Fame ceremony. So,
Yeah, of course.
yeah. So we'll be curious to see what happens there. But yeah, we can move on to the Bears. Another scenario that was just not accounted for in my book was the Houston Texans beating the Indianapolis Colts. Lovie Smith is obviously a planted op by the Bears to collude with the Texans to get us that first overall pick. And, I mean, you know me, I've been on Team Tank for a long time now, and I was perfectly content with number 2. Number 1 has all sorts of facets to it. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about with the Bears-Vikings game. The only thing I had to point out, so Nathan Peterman and Tim Boyle, your boy Tim Boyle, split the snaps at quarterback for the Bears. Justin Fields is out, thank God. No need to get him hurt unnecessarily for no reason. So we got smoked pretty clearly. Justin Jefferson is the only person I wanted to talk about. He reminds me of Kevin Durant. We've talked about Kevin Durant before on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Elite player, but he's starting to show signs that he can be manipulated and rent-freed pretty easily. He was going at some Chicago Bears yesterday, a lot of whom aren't even going to be on the team next year. I understand standing your ground against Jair Alexander because you're going to face him twice a year, and Jair was full-on warfare all week. You're talking to like backup linebackers on our team, and he would be like in their face shouting at them in between whistles and whatever. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? Like, just take a breath. You are much better than everybody on this field, and you do not need to respond to their nonsense if you don't need to. So, I don't know if you caught that, but
No, I didn't see much of that game. It wasn't on TV here, and I don't have Red Zone.
I
So
gotta cancel that today.
so I was stuck with Bills, Pats, and who was what Fox game did they have on? I don't even remember which Fox game they had on.
They didn't have Vikings Bears. Well, I guess nobody really cared about Vikings Bears outside.
No, I was
of
surprised
the
it wasn't
markets,
Vikings Bears.
but
It was a really random game.
pretty useless. Probably like Panthers
Oh,
Saints.
it was Jets Dolphins.
Random. I guess it had
Mm-hmm.
playoff implications.
Yeah.
So yeah, not really much to talk about the game. Glad we lost. And then yeah, so the Texans beat the Colts.
Before we leave the Bears, who are you guys going to trade the number 1 pick to?
I'll get there. So Colts go for it on like 4th and 12 and convert. They get down to 4th and 20 for the season, and someone on the Colts, the safety or whatever, just completely whiffs on picking it off, and it falls right into the arms of Jordan Akins for a touchdown. And rather than going for the extra point, they go for 2 because they fully know they do not want this first overall pick for some reason. Lovie Smith is ready to just burn it down on his way out of town. And they get the 2-point conversion as well to take a 1-point lead, and then they hold off the Colts. And the Bears clinch the number 1 pick in the draft for the first time since 1947. And yes, the Bears should 100% trade this pick down as quickly as possible. They need to get rid of this pick. They do not need it. Ideally, I would love to stay in the top 5 if possible. If that means trading down to, let's say, like 13 or whatever, and then trading back up in some way and still trying to acquire picks that way, I'd be fine with it. My 2 offseason objectives for the Bears, as far as if we're making like a tiered list, number 1A is trade the first pick. Preferably, I would love to trade down to 4 with the Indianapolis Colts. That would be best case scenario because they need a quarterback. The Texans they would have no reason to trade up from 2 to 1 because we're not taking Bryce Young. And then I think 3rd is Seattle.
Arizona.
They're not going to trade
Seattle's
up.
5.
I don't think Seattle would trade up, but I don't know. Maybe they'll do a Rodgers situation where they just draft a guy and bench him for 2 years or something while Geno Smith rides it out for a couple of years. I don't know, but the Colts definitely need a quarterback, and they've been prone to make questionable decisions in the past. So if we can get a first and a first to trade out of that, I would love that.
There's no shortage of teams that need a quarterback either because you also have the Raiders at 7 and Panthers at 9, who I'm sure would be more than interested in moving up if that's what they had to do to get their guy.
Yeah, I said top 5. That might be ambitious. But, yeah, I think at the very minimum we need to stay in the top 10 because we need to get some sort of talent. So I've been banging the Will Anderson drum. He would not be there unless quarterbacks are taken 1st, 3rd, and 4th. He would not be there at 5 because it's either him or Jalen Carter that are going to be the first non-QBs taken, in my opinion. So we have a lot of time to discuss the draft in the offseason, but it's exciting. I mean, we're going into the offseason with roughly $130 million in cap space, and right now we have 8 picks, and that's surely going to rise if we trade out of the number 1 spot. So it's a good time for a rebuild. Hopefully we don't screw it up. My 1B, you ready for this? I want the Bears to trade for in my opinion, a future Hall of Fame player in the offseason on the offensive side of the ball. Any guesses as to who I would be referring to? And well, two hints. Well, let's start with one hint. One hint is he's on a team that's also picking in the top 10 of the draft right now. And no, it's not Devontae. I wish, but he's not leaving.
Is it an offensive lineman?
It is a receiver.
Oh, because I was gonna say like Quentin Nelson from the Colts or something.
I think he's too important for them to trade.
A receiver, future Hall of Famer. DK?
DeAndre Hopkins. Because
Okay.
what he's not going to want to be in a rebuild, and then it's not like the Bears are set up for glory now. We still have to execute the plan correctly, but he has a chance to come here, work with Justin Fields. We could probably trade a third or a fifth or something for him because he's got a big contract. Arizona is going to need a new GM and a new coach now with Kingsbury and Keim gone, and I don't think he's going to want to go through the rebuild. So to me, if we can somehow, because the free agency market for receiver is also piss poor, so we may have to utilize a trade or two to up our receiving game. And Claypool, jury's still out. If we can sign him to a cap-friendly deal, I would take him back, but he also didn't do anything to warrant probably the kind of money he was wanting. So that trade also was looking pretty poor because now that pick is the 32nd pick in the draft that the Steelers have, so that kind of sucks. But, we have upside with Claypool if we sign him for a 1 or 2 year deal, so it's not going to kill anything, I guess. But, yeah, those are my 2 offseason wishes is trade down and get a elite receiver who's on the kind of the back end of their career, but I think DeAndre Hopkins would be – I'm going to start that campaign, see if it goes anywhere. Meanwhile, apparently the Packers are going to draft a receiver with their pick, which is exactly what the team was missing this year.
Yes. Did you see that mock draft that someone put out? Is that what
Yeah.
you're referring to?
Yeah, Jordan Addison to 15. Jordan Addison's going to be a phenomenal player in the NFL. Packers picked 15th, so they should have a lot of options as far as being able to find someone that can fit their team right away.
Yeah.
So let's see. DeMar Hamlin update. Thankfully, DeMar Hamlin is now awake, responsive, communicating with people, FaceTiming his teammates. Everything is trending in a positive direction there. He's still in Cincinnati at the hospital, but what a relief that he is okay. So we're really thankful for all of the training staff on the Bills and the Bengals and everybody at the UC Medical Center there in Cincinnati. Just a fantastic job. That was really scary. I know the episode we recorded right before it happened, and at the time of when we were supposed to publish our episode, we didn't know how things were trending, so I just had added that disclaimer. But that was about as scary a moment I've ever seen in football ever.
Yeah, that was it was one of those where the seconds feel like minutes, but the hour also felt like a second, if that makes sense. Like it was like time was just standing still, but then you looked up and you're like, "Oh my God, it's already been 55 minutes and we haven't heard an update yet." Like it was just you're just so locked in on waiting for an update. I don't know. I know this isn't going to resonate with everyone, but it reminded me a ton of the Wickens crash at Pocono, where it was just like sitting, waiting, hoping, wishing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is it reminded, so as race fans, we've been in the unfortunate position before of seeing a terrible accident and not knowing how the condition of the driver is, and that's been at least 5 or 6 times since we started watching, and it's one of the most unenjoyable experiences ever to sit there and not know how someone you cheer for is doing. And yeah, it felt a lot like that with DeMar, just not knowing. We're in a day and age with social media that once news is found, it gets out pretty quick. Family member, doctor, or something. Anybody who leaks anything, it gets out very quickly. So Yeah, it was just great to see as it was going along and as the days were clicking by, everything was getting more and more positive. So it's always been trending up. I think probably since 24 hours after it's happened, it was kind of always trending the right direction. So we're really thankful for that. And the response from the community and the world has been really cool to see. It's been nice to see everybody kind of bond together over this and a common cause. So it was really nice. And then the Bills' opening kickoff was returned for a touchdown in Buffalo by Naheem Hines, which is just a script you could not write. And so he actually did it twice that game. So Bills did beat the Patriots, but it was just such a cool moment for all of Buffalo and for DeMar to see it. He was watching the game. That had to be super cool. So it was nice to kind of we'll keep monitoring his progress. Obviously, still a lot of work to be done, but best honestly is been the best case scenario since the incident happened.
We were on the road yesterday on our way back home from Milwaukee, and it was right. We were halfway home when the noon games were starting, and Twitter just started blowing up when they returned that opening kickoff, and it was one of those like the entire Twitter feed was that kickoff return,
Yeah,
and I mean, opening kick returns for a touchdown are big enough as is, but just given the like serendipity of it all, it was one of those like I got goosebumps. I'm not even anywhere near a fan of the Buffalo Bills, and it was just like one of those sports moments that you'll always remember of like the entire sport. I think got behind that play and was excited about that because it stood for more than just an opening kickoff return for a touchdown.
yeah. And I got all sappy with you before the episode ended last week, and then Demar had his injury, and now it's like extra sappy. I'm like, lighting. I need a hug. So it was a cool scene in Buffalo there, and really happy about that. Gonna give out my Mouthguard award right now since we're on that topic. I'm sure you saw what Bart Scott said on ESPN.
I
He
did.
he and certain factions of the internet that have nothing better to do all day decided it was a good idea to blame T. Higgins for what happened, which is the most inexcusable and horrendous take that you can have, especially in that kind of situation where T. Higgins already feels bad about it, even though anybody with any sort of football knowledge knows that T. Higgins did not do anything wrong there. We have seen certain plays in the NFL where a player looks like they go out of their way to injure somebody or forcibly try to remove the ball in a manner that's going to cause bodily harm to somebody. This was clearly not one of those plays. And to blame Higgins for anything that happened there on what is described by anybody with a medical profession a complete fluke instance of cardiac arrest, to blame T. Higgins in any sort of way is irresponsible, and you cannot condone it. So felt bad for T. Higgins because he had to kind of go through everything too, and the guilt and the whatever. Even though again he did nothing wrong, but you can't help but have some guilt in those situations. And for someone with a platform to go onto ESPN and say it's T. Higgins' fault was irresponsible and completely reckless. So just that was something I needed to get off my chest.
And I don't know if that was Bart Scott just being butthurt that defensive players catch all the shade for how they hit people, and he thought this was his opportunity to pin something on an offensive player, but incredibly poorly timed and worded and positioned all around.
Yeah. So we're going to get to the playoffs here in a little bit, but just wanted to kind of round out some news and notes from the league. So, as mentioned earlier, Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim have been fired, and it was J.J. Watt's last game in their losing effort to the 49ers. So, as you touched on last week, it was the last week or 2 weeks ago, how underrated we viewed J.J. Watt's time in Houston. He is now officially done, so it's sad to see, but yeah, the 49ers rolled over the Cardinals, though, which was to be expected. And now we get to see Brock Purdy in the playoffs, just like we thought before the season started, for sure.
The scariest team in the playoffs,
Yeah.
led by the legend Brock Purdy.
You know, a team is looking a little sus as they limp into the playoffs is the Cowboys, who did have a shot at the number one seed this weekend. If things, again, we kind of had a hunch Eagles were going to beat the Giants, who had no reason to play their starters. Kind of had a hunch 49ers was going to just take care of business against a bad Cardinals team. Kind of had a hunch the Vikings were going to go into Soldier Field and win because the Bears had nothing to play for, and they suck. So, long shot for the Cowboys. But what we did not expect was the Cowboys to put up 6 points against the Commanders and for Sam Howell to actually look very good in his first career start. If you remember, we talked a long time ago on this episode about how there was a rookie quarterback who did not eat beef ever. That was that guy, Sam Howell. Only eats chicken for his meats. So,
Chicken.
but hey, whatever he's doing, it worked because he took care of business against Cowboys. So, as a Mike McCarthy diehard, how are you feeling about the Cowboys as they enter the playoffs?
Not great. Not great one bit. The fact that they now have to go on the road and play
Tampa.
their nightmare and Mr. Tom Brady, who has never lost to the Cowboys, this is like setting it up perfectly for them to be a one and done team.
And I believe it was week one the Cowboys lost 19-3 to the
Yep.
Buccaneers at home.
Yep.
Alarm bells. I would like to think they're going to be okay, but you just don't know. So,
I'll tell you right now. Spoiler alert: I'm picking the Buccaneers in our picks this week.
all right. Well, I do want to point out as well that despite missing 5 games this year, Dak Prescott is tied for the league leading statistic in interceptions with 15. He's tied with Davis Mills, of all people. So if they get bounced immediately, there will be a lot of questions to ask about this team in the offseason, and more than likely a change of head coach. And who knows what. I think Kellen Moore is super talented, so I wonder what's going to happen with there too. But
I think Jerry is in love with Sean Payton.
so we can talk about that. Sean Payton has been requested to be interviewed by the Broncos, and the Saints have granted permissions because the Saints technically still, quote-unquote, own Sean Payton. Saints have a question mark of their own is if they're going to keep their coach, Dennis Allen, or try to get Sean Payton to come back. The Colts will probably be in play for Sean Payton, so I don't know what's going to happen there. I can tell you, though, that ever since Nathaniel Hackett has left the organization, the Denver Broncos have looked good. They've actually looked good, and Russell Wilson has looked good, and their offense has looked good. Who would have thunk that firing the coach that didn't know what he was doing would actually help the team? That's so crazy.
I feel sort of bad that Russ caught all the shade and Hackett didn't catch much of it until the end. But maybe that's because Hackett has a likable personality.
Well, we
I'm
can
not
all
sure.
agree that, we don't agree, or we don't believe that Russ was being set up for success. However, he still was not playing very well. So there is a little bit of both to go with it. But yeah, ever since Hackett is not on that team, they look great on offense. So almost, I see this is what I wish we did with Matt Nagy. I would have just liked the last 2 games with an interim coach or something, just to see what we can do without him weighing us down. And then you have now the Broncos have this whole offseason be like, hey, look what we did in the last 2 games. And look what it could be if we have competent coaching. So I think that was probably the best thing that ever happened to the Broncos is them having these last 2 games to kind of prove it without Hackett. Because now I think they can sort of somewhat galvanize their fan base for the offseason to get them excited for next year.
They're going to be the don't look now team next year.
Yeah, which is what I thought they were going to be this year. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
did too because they made a lot of acquisitions, but also they looked great on paper and it just didn't work. So kind of a bummer, but so yeah, so they beat the Chargers at home. We can talk about the Colts again for a second. So obviously we know they're terrible. Jim Irsay is apparently trying to get Jim Harbaugh to come to coach his team. I've done 3 years of this Rodgers thing of is he not? I was old enough to remember the whole Favre watch and was Favre going to come back or not. The Jim Harbaugh watch might be the most annoying one of all of them as far as will they, won't they. there's nothing enjoyable about following the Jim Harbaugh train of is he going to come to the NFL or not? Because there was rumors he was. They lose the bowl game. More rumors. Statement comes out from the University of Michigan about how he's their guy.
But
3 days
nowhere in that
later,
statement
now
did it say.
well, 3 days later, now he's being requested for interview again.
Yeah.
I can pull up the statement here.
Let's say I don't think anywhere in the statement did it actually say like Jim Harbaugh will be coaching the Michigan Wolverines in 2023.
I think he's just said he's our guy. I don't know if it actually
Yeah, exactly.
made any
That's
sort
what I
of
mean.
but it was odd timing. It made it sound like they. Let me just pull it up for context. I have to scroll past all of their hype videos from their loss. They're still posting Tom Brady hype videos. That's hilarious. All right. Statement from Jim Harbaugh. I am aware of the rumors and speculation over the past few days. College and NFL teams have great interest in all personnel from players, coaches, staff, and I truly believe that is a testament to the strength of the University of Michigan football program. As I stated in December, while no one knows what the future holds, I expect that I will be enthusiastically coaching Michigan in 2023. I've spoken to yada, 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 and yada, 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 and appreciate their support of our program. Our mission as Wolverines continues as we are preparing for the 2023 season with great passion and enthusiasm. As our legendary coach, Bo Schembechler, said, those who stay will be champions.
Oh, I guess
Sounds
I
like
lied.
a guy who wants to stay, but there again, if he's openly taking interviews, maybe he's just doing it for the clout. I don't know. Maybe he's using it as a chip to get more money. Maybe we're playing 4D chess and
All I know is, selfishly, I hope he stays at Michigan.
so who else we got fired? So Jeff Saturday's more than likely not coming back, although it's not official. Lovie Smith was fired after winning. Let's see. Broncos have a vacancy. Cardinals have a vacancy. And the Panthers, they don't know if they're going to keep Wilkes. I think they're another team that's requesting permission from other teams to interview people, which, doesn't mean Wilkes is necessarily done for. Maybe they're just exploring their options. But I thought Steve Wilkes did a pretty good job there at the end of the year. He got them to 7-9 after a very tough start to the year.
With a quarterback carousel as well.
Yeah, making Sam Darnold out there looking competent. So that'll be curious to see what's going to happen.
So, just going through the Black Monday updates, the Denver Broncos are set to interview Jim Harbaugh,
Wow.
according to Ian Rappaport.
Those who stay will be champions.
Interesting.
Like we touched on earlier, Jaguars won against the Titans to clinch the division. It was kind of weird, though. Their offense didn't look the best. I know the Titans actually have a pretty stout defense, though, but the offense didn't look the best. They did get a scoop and score towards the end of the game to seal it. I want to go out on a limb. We had the lovely discussion preseason about the top 10 coaches according to PFF and how Cliff Kingsbury was somehow on the list. I think Mike Vrabel is kind of in that same category as Mike Tomlin of whatever you give them, whether it's a good team or not, they can manufacture wins just out of their own abilities. Like, he actually does quite a lot with not a lot to work with, especially on offense. Defense, they're stout. Derrick Henry's elite. Other than that, their offense sucks.
Yeah, man, he's a damn good coach. I was thinking the same thing Saturday night, actually, watching the game. Because, truthfully, I don't think the Titans had any business really being in that game.
Yeah.
Let alone leading in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So, did you see that Paul Allen name searches himself on Twitter?
No, really?
He replied to somebody that didn't tag him, and nobody in the replies tagged him or quote tweeted him. But he somehow found it and replied.
Love it.
He had a fun night last night, I bet. That was probably his Super Bowl right there.
It was. People rip on Paul Allen a lot, and I'm one of them. For as much as he hates on the Packers, he does get along with some of our local talking heads on the sports radio and does speak very highly of the franchise in Lambeau, but I still think he's a goon. Um, did you see that the Panthers are also interviewing Jim Caldwell, and the Panthers are also interviewing Frank Reich?
Both, I think, very good coaches in my opinion. I think Jim Caldwell is one of the most underrated coaches of the last decade, and Frank Reich, I think, is a offensive mastermind who can do much better in a situation where they actually surround him with players that aren't over the age of 40. So, yeah. I forgot to touch on one thing with Harbaugh, though. Apparently, he's under investigation for a pre-NIL infraction where he bought a appetizer or something for a recruit at the Brown Jug on campus. And so now the NCAA is launching an investigation. I think it's so silly. Like, sure, was what he did illegal by the definition of the law? Probably. Are we seriously raising a stink about it nowadays where players can get $500,000 for appearing in a car ad? Like, you probably bought a $10 basket of fries for a kid.
It was a $3.99 cheeseburger.
The old Midwest way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
I think it's silly. I think that kind of thing just needs to be. I'm so looking forward to those kind of things not happening anymore. With like, oh, Ohio State had to vacate their wins, even though everybody knows they won 10 games that year. Or, oh, Reggie Bush can't have a Heisman Trophy or things like that. I'm so ready for that era of college football to be gone because I think it's all silly. Jadeveon Clowney was excused from excused from the team because he came out and said that the team curtails coverages for Myles Garrett so that Myles Garrett's numbers look good and that he doesn't feel like the team believes in him. And the team turned around and basically sent him home and said, "You're not playing this week." And he's an impending free agent. And yeah, I wonder if the comments helped or hurt his situation.
remember when that guy openly said he was going to slack off his last year at South Carolina?
Yeah, he
And
kind of
then we all,
started not like started it, but like the whole bowing out of bowl games and certain players like if they're 3-3 to start the year and they're a projected first round pick, they might just take it off. I think he kind of started that.
I think taking an entire season off should have been the red flag we all needed.
He's a talented player, but I don't think he's ever fulfilled the potential that we saw at South Carolina. Like he's an effective defensive lineman. I wouldn't say he's a Myles Garrett by any stretch. So yeah, who knows? But the Browns actually looked halfway decent. Well, they lost to the Steelers, but I want to say that Deshaun Watson actually looked halfway decent again. He's starting. I think he was starting to warm up there the last two games. So some optimism for the Browns heading into the offseason with Watson. They have to figure out what to do. I mean, they're going to figure out what to do with Clowney here pretty quick. But I think Stefanski has so far survived. I haven't seen anything. So he was the one that was on the fringe of if they were going to make it or not. Nothing about Josh McDaniels out of Vegas. They got trounced by the Chiefs. Think we can probably confidently say that Patrick Mahomes is going to win the MVP again.
Yeah, I think he's a shoe-in at this point.
Because, some of the other candidates didn't make it the full season. Jalen Hurts would be the other obvious one, but he didn't make it a full season, and that hurts the votes. Justin Jefferson maybe kind of tailed off at the end. Nick Bosa maybe 18.5 sacks. Very elite season from him. I don't know, but what do you do if you're the Raiders? Are you in full we need a quarterback mode, or do you want to see what you have with Jared Stidham and maybe sign a veteran in the meantime?
I think they need a quarterback.
So just pull. If you can trade up, do it. Or if you can see if like a Will Levis drops in your lap, take him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably their best bet. Not comparing him to the Seahawks because it's not like Jarrett Stidham was an off-season signing like Matt Flynn, but I think you could draft a guy and essentially make it an open competition in training camp.
Yeah,
That's probably your
I think
best
that would be
bet.
the best way to go forward. I'd say keep him, but also you need to hedge your bets elsewhere
Yeah.
with The more the
Don't
merrier in that situation.
yeah, don't sell the farm for a quarterback just yet. But
The Rams now have a coaching controversy as well. Sean McVay isn't sure about coming back next year, which is so odd because, who could have thought that gambling your whole future and then having to deal with the repercussions was a good idea?
I am starting to refer to this as the potential pro version of Urban Meyer. When the going gets tough, we get going, and then he's going to re-sign with a different team that's set up for success in 2 to 3 years. I hope that doesn't happen. I've always thought highly of Sean McVay, so I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous to. I mean, they clearly gambled their whole future on like a win now situation. They won, so kudos to them. But then now he doesn't want to sit here and deal with their lack of draft picks, lack of talent that they've not been able to acquire because they don't have any cap space or draft. And it's just, like to me it's fraudulent almost to say that he can't be remembered as one of the great coaches if he doesn't stick this out. John Harbaugh went through some tough years. Andy Reid went through some tough years. Mike McCarthy went through some tough years. There's been coaches that have gone with the ups and downs of their organizations, and some are more fortunate than others to have patient organizations for those down years. And I don't think anybody thought Sean McVay's job was in jeopardy because of this season, but he's now making it in jeopardy just on him wanting to leave. He's just going to pack up and leave. I wonder what that does to Les Snead, too, who's been his partner in crime through all this, because if he quits, too, they're both frauds, in my opinion, if they both just up and leave, because then someone else is going to inherit this mess that they created, and they're going to look bad for 3 years while they're rebuilding.
Well, and this was a mess that they started to create even a couple of years before the Matt Stafford trade.
Signing Goff to a ridiculous contract.
Yep, they had that. They had the Jalen Ramsey trade. Um,
Cooks trade.
yep, and
Gurley
then
signing.
wasn't there a linebacker they traded for as well?
Well, they signed Leonard Floyd. I don't remember.
Maybe that's who I'm thinking of.
They
I might
they,
be thinking
they
of
paid a
Leonard
lot
Floyd.
for him,
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm thinking of. But it's not like it was just the Stafford trade that has set them back with draft picks and cap issues. It started in 2018 or even before then.
yeah. So curious to see what happens there. Want to round out the episode by talking about the playoffs. So we got Seahawks at 49ers, Chargers at Jaguars Saturday, Dolphins at Bills Sunday, as well as the Giants at the Vikings and the Ravens at the Bengals. And on Monday night, we have Cowboys at Buccaneers. So out of those 6 matchups, is there one team that you are super concerned about? I know we touched on the Cowboys earlier, but is there any other teams, or is it the Cowboys the most concerning out of those, or is there any other teams that you think are in jeopardy that we wouldn't maybe consider to lose? So maybe not like a Seahawks because we're kind of expecting that. But is there any teams that you're concerned about?
I don't know who's favored in the Chargers Jacksonville game. Do you
As
know?
far as like Vegas?
Yeah, what's the line on that one?
Let me check while you're talking.
Because that's the only other one I could see going a little wonky. I don't think Cincinnati will have any problems with Baltimore, especially because the Lamar situation is still kind of up in the air. Um, I don't foresee Buffalo having any issues with Miami. I think that'll be not an easy win, but that'll be a sure win.
Chargers are minus 120 right now.
Okay.
So barely favorites.
I don't know, man. Jacksonville could be sneaky. I don't want to. I wouldn't call them the team that nobody wants to play, but Doug Peterson's another really good head coach, and Trevor Lawrence certainly hasn't reached his full peak and potential yet, and he obviously won't this postseason. But I think if they can win this weekend, I think that would be pretty disappointing for the Chargers. Even though they absolutely shit stomped the Chargers earlier this season, the Chargers were without like half their starters on offense. So that's the one that I kind of have circled as could be interesting or most interesting, other than the Cowboys Buccaneers game.
I'm fully on the Vikings watch, the fraud
Yeah,
watch.
I was just thinking that. I figured you were going to be on that watch, and I am as well. That's This must be what it's like to like root against the Packers in the playoffs, because that's going to be me this entire postseason.
Every year, man. Yeah, the fraud watch is on. They won against the Giants on a last second field goal in the regular season, but the Giants look sneaky good, and they're basically coming off a mini bye. So players hopefully are rested and ready to go. And um, I don't know. I'm not saying the Vikings are going to lose, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. So other than
That
that,
would
as
be
far as
so
the other,
rich.
that'd be funny. I mean, yeah, like you said, Bengals, Bills, and 49ers, I'm particularly not worried about this week. So interesting to see what happens there. And then Chiefs and Eagles got byes, so we get to figure out their opponents before the next set of the playoffs. And then last thing before we wrap up, national championship game tonight. It is Georgia TCU. Georgia keeps banging this drum about how they've been disrespected by people or whatever. I'm not sure I'm buying that. Are we sticking with Georgia, or do you think there's going to be a Hypno Frog upset?
I think Georgia wins, but I think it's a lot closer than we may think. I could see it coming down to a final drive or two in the fourth quarter as the difference maker. The Georgia secondary just hasn't looked that great. LSU put up 500 yards passing against them, and I know that was a blowout, but still 500 yards passing. Ohio State took advantage of their secondary, um, and it'll be interesting to see the fact that Max Duggan is also a running quarterback, how they're going to deal with that. So I still think Georgia wins, but I think TCU keeps it really, really close.
I also think Georgia wins, and it should be a fun time. It's also, if for those who, I mean, you're going to be listening to this after it comes out, it is the longest football game of the year. It's like 4.5 hours. It's quite ridiculous, but still an enjoyable one. It's always like the Monday after, or the second Monday of the year, so it's kind of fun. So that's it. We made it through the 18-week process.
Final thoughts on the regular season. What's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway is we were spot on to the Bears sucking. We were not spot on the Packers record. I have a recap of where our preseason predictions were compared to what they actually were. We both got the Seahawks dead wrong. I predicted the Chiefs at 14-3 or 13-4 or whatever they were. It's 13-4. I want to pat myself on the back for that one. And then, yeah, it was a fun season. There was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of cool plays, and I think we're set up for another crazy draft and free agency period of who knows what to expect.
Before we get there, playoffs are going to be awesome. And if you're anything like me, you're rooting for a neutral site AFC Championship game because that would be electric.
That'd be fun. And I imagine Detroit would be selected, which would be kind of lame, but geographically. See, it's almost like I wish there was a nice stadium in Chicago they could use, but, here we are. So that's it. Really excited for the playoffs to start. We'll have a full recap. We'll have a lot of time to delve into that because we don't have any other teams to focus on other than the teams in the playoffs. So, and depending on what news comes out this week, obviously. But thanks so much for listening. We hope you guys enjoy the first round of the playoffs.